Hi there, hope you're well. In the workshop this week, well, we end with a saw wall, but before we get to that, we need to make ourselves a set of Frankenshelves. That's coming up next. So yes, at the end of the previous video, and if you didn't catch that, you might want to take a look. I was sifting through some piles of scrap, trying to find some usable pieces. Let's pick up where we left off and see how I got on with that. With all the timber cleaned up by running it through the thicknesser, I can cut the redwood surround to length. And join the two pieces that will make up one of the sides. I have these butted together on the bench and I'm cutting across them so that the kerf of the blade cuts both ends, making a perfect joint. Then it's dominoes, glue and clamps. One of the things I really like, I put a post out on Instagram recently about tape measures. Lots of people talking about their favourites. I really like these. These are a Swedish make called Tallmeter, and I like them particularly because they've got this extra little leg that pops out so that you can do internal measurements. What you have is you have two scales. So you've got a red scale, so that you're reading off the internal measurement, it's plus 100 mil, and you've got a black scale when you're just using it as a regular tape measure. And of course the rookie mistake that you only make once is that you read off the wrong scale and you end up with boards that are 100 mil too short. And that's exactly what I've done with these two. I managed to get these 1766 instead of 1866, which is just infuriating because I don't have any more of that. The only bit of spare I've got of that redwood is this. So I'm going to have to patch a 100 mil piece in on each end, and of course I haven't got clamps long enough, so I'll have to figure out some way of getting it on there. What I might do, I've got some I've got some dowel. I bought some Meranti dowel for something else a while back. So I might just bang a couple of dowels through there long, but to start with, we'll cut an extra couple of 100 mil pieces of this and patch those in. I'm out of practice. I'm clamping battens either side of the board, then using the battens to bear against while clamping up the extra end piece, working from both sides to keep everything as straight as possible. With the glue set and the clamps off, the boards can get a quick sand to clean off any excess glue screws. So that's all glued up out of the clamps, cleaned up. Looks like it's going to be pretty strong, very happy with that. But just belt and braces, I would like to have a physical, mechanical thing through there. Of course, what I should have done, because these shelves are just going to be screwed on, I should just use long screws through the side into here. What have I just thrown away? A whole bunch of 8-inch timber screws, because I didn't think I'd ever use those again. Anyway, what I'm going to do with this is, I do have some Sapele dowel that I've bought for something else. And what I've done, well, it's 9.5 mil 3/8. The only 9.5 mil drill bit I've got is just about 100 mil, so it's just about going to get to the end of that extension piece, but not any further in. The two longer bits I've got is either an 8 mil or a 10 mil, and a 10 mil is just a little bit too loose. So what I've ended up doing is spending a little bit of quality time with a hand plane and then put in the dowel in a drill and a bit of sandpaper. I managed to taper this so that it's 8mm-ish at one end and 9.5 at the other. And that 8mm just slots in there nicely and is a nice snug fit. So what I'm going to do is drill through this for 9.5mm and then continue with an 8mm bit and then hammer those in with plenty of glue. I think we'll be fine. So short drill bit first, nice and steady, and then a long drill bit through to do the whole thing. Then apply glue and dowels. The two middle shelves will be made from a patchwork of bits and pieces, and I've planned these out in the most basic way, adding small extensions with dominoes to make full width planks. No fancy clamping here, just wide tape. Then those planks can be dominoed together. And once set, the two halves can be glued together to make the finished thickness with all the joins overlapping, hopefully. If anybody asks you why you have so many clamps, that's most of them, certainly the one-handed and the F-clamps, just on a single shelf. Mad. The other shelf is much the same, just a simpler patchwork of an old length of decking and a piece of very dry but surprisingly straight redwood. Again, all held together with dominoes and glue. These two were a bit swimmy when faced up, so I put a brad in each corner to keep things in place while I added the clamps. The redwood wasn't quite wide enough, so I've added in a strip that I cut off the decking earlier. While that's gluing up, I can trim off the excess dowels then get the first Frankenshelf cut back to size, first to width, and then to length using the extended redwood as a gauge plus an 18mm packer. More on that later. By now the second shelf is out of clamps and can be trimmed back to width. And then that extra strip of decking can be planed back to thickness. Yeah, I know, me and hand planes. And after that, of course, it's the joy of sanding. So finally, after feels like an eternity, and certainly for me, probably even longer for you, we have all the bits that we need, machined, sanded, jointed, whatever. The two shelves have come at slightly different thicknesses. We've got about 32mm on this one and about closer to 40, 38, 39 on this one. I'm going to leave those as they are, just to mess with your OCD, basically. What I'm going to do is put these into housings. You might call them a dado, basically a groove that the shelf fits into. And the reason for that is simply because these are made up out of you know, two thicknesses of board. If you just screwed it, you know, butt jointed it, you put a fixing in through there, you almost guarantee that you're going to split those two boards. So just by keeping it contained like that, it's going to hopefully prevent that from happening. And in order to do that, I'm going to make a little jig. There are lots of ways of doing this. I'm just going to make a simple little one-off jig to do these two shelves, which inconveniently are slightly different thicknesses. But I'll just show you how to do that quickly now. Then we'll get those done, and then fingers crossed we'll be able to nail this together and get it up on the wall. I've butted the two shelf ends together so they can be machined at the same time, and quickly mark the shelf positions. And then I can start putting the jig together from a couple of bits of plywood and some 2x1 battens. Here I'm fixing the batten to one side of the plywood, using a precision square to keep it true, and then fixing the other batten to the other side, making sure it's tight up against the workpiece. Then I can drop the shelf into position, butt the other half of the jig up against it, screw it down, and then make sure the jig is in position on the pencil line. I've got a bearing guided flush trimming bit in the router, and I've set the plunge depth using a piece of 9mm scrap. Then I can route the housings in 2 passes, and yes, thank you, I should have clamped the jig down. Onto the second shelf, and I can get the jig into position, then adjust it for the slightly thicker material, again working directly off the shelf. And then route the housings as before. So not too bad overall. I did make a mistake. You've probably spotted that already. I didn't clamp the jig down. And it did move slightly on the first one, so I've got a slightly bigger gap than I want. So I'm just going to hammer in a little piece of scrap to fill that, but the second one was fine. So now it's just a question of getting this built and getting the lights onto it and then getting it into position. So I'm going to be screwing and banging and hammering for a minute, and I'll catch you in a second. Okay, so I've got a couple of clamps set up here as spreaders so you can see the extent of the gap. It does need to be up at the top of the housing, unfortunately, rather than the bottom. And I've just got a little bit of scrap that came off when I trimmed one of the shelves, and I can actually feed that in there until it just starts to bite. There we go. Pulls in nice and tight. Like that. Far from perfect, but far from a disaster for a set of workshop shelves. A quick dry run to make sure the shelves actually fit, then they can come out again and have their lights installed, well, stuck on anyway. I've decided to set the shelves back 50mm from the front edge, and as before they're simply fixed in place with screws driven from within the cabinets. Musical shelves with their different thicknesses. So there we are. I think I'll call that one done and in for today. Been a long old week putting these in. Certainly took much longer than I expected. as I think I said earlier on, total respect to anybody who makes stuff out of, upcycling, recycling, reusing old timber, that kind of thing. It took a lot of cleaning up. 200 litres of my extractor, tin drum extractor things, full of chippings from the planer. So yeah, amazing. But it's all about making use of what we've got. I've turned a couple of old sets of shelves that, to be honest, were just built from scrap originally, getting on for 20 years ago, not long after I moved in here. And I've turned them into another set of shelves made pretty much from scrap. But yeah, it's going to do exactly what I wanted to do. I don't think I've ever made so many mistakes on a job like this before. I'm clearly badly out of practice, but somebody once said, you don't get better at what you do, you just get better at hiding your mistakes. And I've tried to be as honest and as upfront about all the mistakes I made on this, and whatever they were, we've managed to resolve them. For a set of workshop shelves, at least, I don't think I'd get away with some of the things I've done for a client job, but then that's not what I do anymore, so there we are. I'll call that one done for today, though. Thanks ever so much for taking a look. And while my Patreon and member credits run, I'm just going to start popping things on those shelves so that I end up looking a bit more normal. There's lots more to do on this still, and lots more to do here in the workshop, but I'm going to take a break from this sort of making stuff for a while. We'll talk about a couple of products, I think, in the next couple of videos, and then we'll get back to this with some little boxes for the cabinets. But that's it for this one. Thanks ever so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.